The year was 1787. The place was the State House in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, where the American people adopted a new constitution, and by doing so undertook a noble experiment in which citizens, through their elected representatives, governed themselves. In the document's first 10 amendments, known as the Bill of Rights, U.S. citizens also were guaranteed a collection of far-reaching freedoms never before officially recognized by any government. Freedoms we still enjoy to this very day. Among them, freedom of religion, freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, freedom of the press, and the right to a fair trial. For the most part, the experiment was an unqualified success. For in time, the United States became a nation without equal, one with not only picturesque towns that stood as reminders of America's rural past, but also towering cities with busy offices and productive factories. The United States also became a land of great universities, where the freedom to pursue new ideas was actively encouraged. And it became a country where works of creative genius could be written and performed free from the censor's stifling hand. The United States became the most powerful and influential nation in the history of the world, a beacon of freedom and justice for people everywhere. Yet, in a sometimes dangerous world, freedom and justice are not guaranteed to last forever. Indeed, throughout our nation's history, there have been times when our freedoms have been tested. For there has never been a shortage of tyrants who do not share our country's commitment to human rights and to the dignity of the individual. Often, these despots have been responsible for the deaths of millions. When left unchecked, the destructive power of these dictators has been horrible, and has thrown countless numbers of people into lives of abject misery. Regrettably, these ruthless fanatics have not disappeared in the 21st century. Yet America, more often than not with the help of its armed forces, has always met the challenge. The men and women of the Air Force, Navy, Marines, Army, and Coast Guard heroically provide a protective shield for the United States of America. One day each year, on Veterans Day, we hold ceremonies to honor those heroes and heroines. It is one way our country shows its appreciation for the sacrifices our military personnel have made to protect the United States and its friends. Veterans Day traces its beginnings to World War I, which began in 1914. When the troops came home victorious 4 years later, many felt a day should be set aside to honor all the Americans who had fought in that terrible conflict. The peace came on the heels of an agreement to stop the fighting, an armistice, signed at 11 o'clock in the morning on the 11th day of the 11th month, November 1918. 1 year later in Washington, D.C., President Woodrow Wilson declared that November 11th would be called Armistice Day to honor all World War I veterans. The holiday was celebrated every year after that, although it didn't become an official federal holiday until 1938. For more than 2 decades, it was hoped that a worldwide conflict would never again break out. But in 1939, World War II began, when German troops invaded Poland. Several years later, Germany's ally, Japan, bombed Pearl Harbor in Hawaii, and the United States entered the war. Soon, U.S. troops sailed overseas to fight a determined enemy. More than 670,000 wounded American soldiers were treated in hospitals during and after the conflict, and more than 400,000 U.S. military personnel died in the war. In all, more than 1 million casualties, so that Americans could live their lives free from tyranny and oppression. Finally, in 1945, Japan surrendered. the United States and its allies won the war and celebrated. But another conflict erupted 5 years later in Korea, a country in Eastern Asia. Once more, our country's men and women in uniform found themselves far from home, thousands of miles from their loved ones. Once again, they faced a determined enemy, but eventually they were able to stop the aggression. When the fighting ended in 1953, President Dwight D. Eisenhower changed the name of Armistice Day to Veterans Day, to honor all veterans, not just those who had served in World War I. Today, programs that stress military history are held around the country as November 11th approaches. At some places, such as this military museum in Chicago, Illinois, former and present members of our armed forces share their experiences.
I just felt like I had accomplished the world. There was nothing I couldn't do. It was the greatest feeling I really have ever had.
Besides military museums, schools are another place where present and former members of the armed services give presentations as Veterans Day nears. This student, after hearing one of those presentations, decided to send regular emails to her aunt, a nurse on a Navy hospital ship. Giving military personnel news from home is an important way to show support for those who do the often dangerous work of protecting our country. Gathering, packing, and sending small presents to members of the military overseas are still other Veterans Day activities in which school children often participate, especially when our country is at war. However, it is the Veterans Day ceremony at Arlington National Cemetery near Washington, D.C. that is undoubtedly the most widely recognized event that takes place on the holiday. On that day, a wreath is placed at the Tomb of the Unknowns, a burial site where a small number of unidentified soldiers from various wars are buried. People also gather at war memorials on November 11th to honor our country's fallen heroes and heroines. The World War II Memorial and the Vietnam War Memorial in Washington, D.C. are two of the most well-known. For the people who gather there, it's a time to pay homage to and remember the brave military men and women of bygone years. Many make a tracing or rubbing of the name of fallen comrades. Of course, there are also Veterans Day parades in many communities around the country. Typically, patriotic music, floats, and marching soldiers are seen at these events. Of course, veterans participate too, and as you might expect, speeches are given.
I encourage all Americans to recognize with appreciation the sacrifice and service of all our patriotic veterans.
At Veterans Day events held in both small towns and large cities, veterans have an opportunity to reacquaint themselves with old comrades, exchange greetings, and relive their experiences as members of the military. At veterans' hospitals, medical facilities where injured or sick veterans receive health care services, something else takes place on or near November 11th. That's when family members, friends, and volunteers often make a special point to visit those who have served in the armed forces. Making hospital visits to veterans is still one more way to say thank you to the people who have done so much to preserve our freedom and well-being. In short, Americans are fortunate to enjoy freedom and prosperity in unequaled measure. Yet, throughout our history, our good fortune has been challenged by those who do not share our beliefs in the freedom and dignity of each individual. Whenever these tyrants have challenged our country, it has been the men and women of our armed services who have met that challenge with bravery and resolve. And so we honor and thank them officially each November 11th. Yet, perhaps it would be appropriate to honor and thank them on the other days of the year as well.
3 teens were arrested today for defacing the Kensington Park War Memorial overnight. The destruction includes painted messages against the military and the war in the Middle East. The three teams were picked up in the early morning hours after evidence was left at the scene.
Grandpa, something wrong?
Some people sure have short memories, and those who are too young to know need to be taught. Come on, I want to show you guys something.
Yesterday, December 7th, 1941, a date which will live in infamy. The United States of America was suddenly and deliberately attacked by naval and air forces of the Empire of Japan.
At dawn on the morning of the 6th of June, 1944, 225 Rangers jumped off the British landing craft and ran to the bottom of these cliffs. 225 came here. After 2 days of fighting, only 90 could still bear arms. These are the boys of Puente Hope. These are the men who took the cliffs. These are the champions who helped free a continent. These are the heroes who helped end a war. You are men who in your, quote, lives fought for life and left the vivid air signed with your honor.
In the name of God and country, I learned to defy gravity.
To honor my family, I lived in the belly of a beast.
I fixed the hearts of iron monsters.
I became a worm in the mud for dignity.
For honor. For righteousness' sake.
For God and country.
I fought for you.
I fought for you.
For you.
I fought for you.
I fought for you. I fought for you.
I fought for you.
For you.
For you.
For you.
For you.
I fought for you.
I fought for you.
I fought for you, and I do it again.